SUVs are definitely the hottest new vehicle segment in North America right now, so let's dive into our picks for our 2024 SUV of the Year award. So, Travis, let's talk about our 4 finalists this year. What have we got?
Well, we had quite a few to pick from. It's like you said, the hottest segment in the United States. It's been that way for a couple years now, and it's a tough list to go through. That said,
Yeah.
we've grabbed quite a few from some different segments and some different kinds of standouts. But our list starts out with the Subaru Crosstrek. Then we have the Toyota Grand Highlander, the Jeep Wrangler slash 4xe. We'll touch on that one when we get there, and then the Kia Telluride, bringing up not fourth place, but the last one on our list.
Yep. I went down my list this year, and it looks like we drove over 100 SUVs this year because there are just so many of them really available in North America. Now, to be on
Yeah.
this list, they have to be on sale by the end of first quarter 2024. We have to know pricing information for them. And of course, we have to have driven it within the last year. There also has to be some sort of reason to drive it, and that's why we've driven them. So if there is an SUV that's been on sale for a while and we haven't driven it this year, we drove it last year. That's why it's not on this list, because it's not the newest, greatest thing that people are interested in. But let's dive into that Crosstrek first. How much is it going to set you back?
Yeah, so this Crosstrek is coming in by far the least expensive on this list. It's going to start at $25,195, but that is coming with all-wheel drive, which is one of the big standpoints of
Mhm.
not just all Subarus, but this Crosstrek, because as far as a crossover vehicle with all-wheel drive, it's a pretty inexpensive one.
Yep, and that's definitely why it's on this list, because it is one of the least expensive small SUVs available in America. Although we should, I guess, talk about the whole SUV. Is it an SUV? Is it not an SUV? It's basically a lifted hatchback. It is sort of shrunken Outback. It's the same formula that's made SUVs, or Subaru rather, such a popular brand in North America. And there's some solid reasons to get that. It's essentially a lifted Impreza, or the Impreza is a less lifted Crosstrek, whatever you want to call it. Relatively easy to put bikes in the top because it has that low roof line, pretty practical, aerodynamic, so the highway fuel economy is great. And it's now going to be Subaru's bestseller in 2024, it looks like.
For sure. And you do, when you hop inside, you do have a more car like driving position, but because you do have that ground clearance, it's still an elevated ride height. So it is a little bit easier to get in and out for folks. You do still sit a little bit higher on the road, which again is one of the reasons that SUVs, and we've kind of lumped crossovers into that SUV category. But when you look at the shape of them, that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yep.
That's why they've been so popular, is just increased ride height and people feeling a little bit more comfortable higher off the ground.
Yep. And so just a little bit of background here, I guess I should say. These pictures are mostly pictures that we took when we were driving these vehicles. And that Subaru Crosstrek is on a ski run in the Catskill Mountains of New York, where Subaru took us out to basically play in the mud. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to think of the Subaru as sort of a benefit of its construction. Is it's relatively lightweight, so it doesn't need a whole lot of power. So the fuel efficiency is better. And in the mud and on some of those grassy slopes where we're just, trucking up the mountain, etc., it performed better than a Grand Highlander or a Kia Telluride would have. Two options on this list as well, simply because of its size and its lightweight, etc. So it could just go places and fit places where some of the larger vehicles in this segment really couldn't. But it's not a Jeep Wrangler.
No, I mean, I would describe this scrappy. And I
Hmm.
think it would
Yeah.
take that on. There's a lot of things it can do, and it might not be the best at it, but it will get it done. And if those are some of the things that you're interested in, it's hard to beat that capability, that willingness to try more for just about $25,000. We did mention it's a lot like the Impreza. The Impreza is actually now more like the Crosstrek, just in its overall construction. So you're not going to get an enormous amount of space. It's not nearly as tall as far as like floor to roof line as you'll find in some of the other crossover categories, but it's got just enough to do quite a bit. And I think that's its calling card, is it has just enough, and you pay just enough for it. I'm glad it's on the list. It is very different than the other entrants here, but it is certainly worth mentioning.
Yep. So let's talk about the sort of the polar opposite then, which is the Jeep Wrangler. It's here because it is the best seller on this list. Generally, Jeep has been selling over 200,000 Wranglers a year over the last few years. Of course, the Ford Bronco has eaten into that sales just a little bit because they used to sell more than 250,000 of them.
For someone like myself who has never shopped for a Jeep Wrangler, it's surprising how many folks do. But
Hmm. It's definitely America's SUV.
it really is, and in all the traveling that we've done, going out to these different places to drive these different vehicles, you will always see a Jeep. And in my head, I go, somebody thinks there's a reason for them to have that Jeep here. Down in California, people love to pop the top off and drive around. In the
Yep.
Seattle area, those tops are never off, but they feel better because of the ground clearance. They're worried about the snow every once in a while, or they take it up to the mountains, so they need that off-road capable four-wheel drive. Um, there's an excuse to buy a Jeep for anyone who wants one.
Yep, and there's now the plug-in excuse because the Wrangler is the best-selling plug-in hybrid in America, which is also something I never thought I would say somehow. And a lot of the
It's
success,
absolutely astounding.
yeah, and a lot of the success reigns down to the fact that it is now, of course, a four-door Wrangler because the days of the two-door selling better than the four-door are really long gone. And the vast majority of them, around 90 something percent, are the four-door format. So essentially it's the rugged go anywhere RAV4 sized thing. So if you can fit a RAV4 in a parking spot, maybe a little bit bigger than a RAV4, but if you can fit a RAV4 there, you could probably fit a Jeep Wrangler there. And then you have locking axles, an actual two-speed transfer case, an actual frame under the body. You have an engine choices. You can get a factory winch. You can get the tops that come off, the doors that come off, the windshield that comes off. So, definitely the SUVist of the SUVs on this list, if you will.
Right. I mean, when we look at the 4xe, like you said, it is the number one selling plug-in hybrid in America. That one starts just under $51,000, which is certainly more expensive than the base price. However, there are very few base Wranglers that are sold out there. One of the things you can do with your Wrangler is anything you want, and a lot of that comes from the factory. So if you
Yep.
want to throw a winch in, if you want to do different tops, if you want to do different wheels and tires, the interiors can get quite nice. They can be very feature rich, but you're going to have to pay for it pretty rich to get there. There's not a lot you can't do in a Jeep. And if you're going to buy a Jeep, I would certainly look at the 4xe. I think that adds just to the capability of it around town, even on your off roading. You get all the torque of that electric motor. Again, it's not something I would have assumed. I look at something like the RAV4 Prime and I go, that's the best seller. But it is not, even if it
Yep.
does things different than the Jeep that I think more people want. The Jeep's on top, so we got to give it credit.
Yep. And if you want things like side curtain airbags and power seats, you can finally get them in a Wrangler for 2024. But now we should talk about the options that are definitely different than these two.
Yeah, and I think let's start with the Grand Highlander, which is really leaning towards the pragmatic side of things versus the possibilities of it all. The Grand Highlander starts out at 44,670. It is your three-row, more dedicated three-row Highlander that is built on a tried and true platform that is using a tried and true powertrain combination, and it's been really well received for good reason.
Yeah, if you want the biggest Highlander ever, that is the Grand Highlander. And honestly, it may not look like it right at first glance, but on the inside, the biggest Toyota SUV that they've ever built is actually the Grand Highlander as well, because the Sequoia has less legroom and less third row headroom than we find in the Grand Highlander. This is definitely Toyota responding to the market in a way because Toyota finally realized that sales of large three-row crossover SUV things like Telluride, like Palisade, Atlas, etc., they realized that those sales were starting to increase. And we noticed that in 2023, Highlander actually lost its sales position to the Kia Telluride. So the Kia Telluride is now the third best seller in this segment in the United States. I don't expect that to last. I actually think the Grand Highlander is going to take away that sales crown, but it really shows that the shopper has been looking for something bigger and roomier. And at the launch of the Grand Highlander, Toyota's engineers basically said that that is exactly what they were seeing too, and that they were responding to specifically the Kia Telluride, the Hyundai Palisade, and the Volkswagen Atlas. That they thought that that's what they needed to do to stay competitive. And they really did a good job, but they also brought along some of the things that made the Highlander such an appealing option, like the hybrid system. So if you want a Grand Highlander that gets 35 miles per gallon, it is by far the most fuel efficient entry in its segment.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just a few years ago, where the three-row SUV was really a body-on-frame SUV, that's what was available. Their efficiency was not a concept anyone had ever considered. If your gas mileage started with 2, you were in a great spot. But now you can carry around a lighter, more efficient, I think better packaged. I mean, it's all designed to be just as big as it needs to be. And when we see the market saying we want more, I think the Grand Highlander is a great way to do it. I would rather jump from a Highlander to a Grand Highlander than a Highlander to an Expedition.
Next on the list, of course, is the vehicle that arguably helped create the Grand Highlander, and that is the Kia Telluride, which sales success-wise is another surprise. We talked about the Mavericks sales success surprising Ford in a different episode, but Telluride was the same sort of thing. Kia literally still cannot build enough of them to meet demand, so there are still reasonable markups here and there. And they could sell even more if they could actually build them. It actually has been beating the Honda Pilot at the sales war for about a full year now.
Yeah, and coming in at 36,000, if you can find one there. I imagine not too many base Tellurides are the ones people are buying, but it is there. That's a lot of vehicle for the price. Like you said, it's a third row and it's a functional, attractive third row. The package has had some fine tuning over the years, and I think that's only built upon. Really, it came in. It came in hard and fast, and it took people by surprise. It quickly became the third row to look at. Its cousin, the Palisade, has also done well, but the Tellurides stepped forward again and again and said, "I am worth looking at," and it's certainly
Yep.
true.
Yep. And so for 2024, there were a few minor tweaks. We got the orange marker lamps coming back in the front. People apparently were very sad that they were missing in 2024. 2023. So they retweaked that. And then they reshuffled the option deck a little bit. If you want to know more about the 2024 Telluride, we're going to have a full video review on that coming soon because it was one of the last vehicles we drove in 2023. And that's why it is on this list right here. Just briefly talking through some of the competition. Obviously, again, we have that Volkswagen Atlas. There are a lot of three-row SUVs, but specifically coming up in 2024, I think we have some really interesting competition from General Motors. The Chevy Traverse and the Buick Acadia the GMC Acadia and Chevy Traverse are getting a full redesign for 2024. They're getting over 300 horsepower standard, I think it's 328 horsepower standard from a new 2.5-liter 4-cylinder turbo. So a little bit more displacement, a whole lot more power than Grand Highlander. And the Acadia has really grown inside. So it is going to be bigger than either of these options as far as interior volume and interior roominess goes. And I think it's also going to be pushing some new boundaries when it comes to interior refinement, especially in the top end trims of the Acadia, where we get big screens, real wood trim, upgraded leather, etc. It's really going to change, I think, the perception, especially that Traverse and Acadia have had over the last few years.
I think with that, you'll also see them pushing the boundaries on pricing for a segment.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
but one of the reasons we're seeing redesigns and so much investment from the manufacturer in these vehicles is because of how well they've done, how popular they've been, and how much people want them. So it's great to see competition. I like to see competitors bring in their best because it raises the game for everyone else. Hopefully, we have time to spend with those over the next year. They can look towards 2025. But it's great to see the 4 that we have here. I think they all come in on their own merit, and it'll be curious to see what this segment turns into in the years to come.
Yep, and I should mention before we go that one of the runner-ups here was the Honda Pilot. We didn't talk about that one just yet. I will say that when all of the scores were finally tallied up, the Pilot didn't quite hit it to this level. Because Pilot is not offering all of the kind of feature set that we do find in, say, a Kia Telluride as far as the options and gadgets and gizmos offered there. Pilot does have some advantages in that if you want a top-end trim with 8 seats, you can get it in the Pilot. It does have a V6, which is something that you won't find in the Grand Highlander in any trim at all. But I would say that in some other ways, the Pilot has failed to really live up to what a lot of folks wanted out of the redesign. If you love Honda, you're going to love the Pilot. But if you wanted something that's a bit more adventurous, if you want something that is more fuel efficient, etc., then you want to take a look at the other options. The Telluride is definitely roomier, a little bit more family friendly in that respect. And Grand Highlander is significantly roomier on the inside and significantly more fuel efficient than the Pilot, which is certainly why it ended up beating it to this list. So without further ado, be sure and sound off down there in the comment section. Let us know what you think about these 4 choices. Which do you think should win our award? We haven't decided yet. And let us know if we're crazy and something else should be SUV of the year. So let us know down there in the comment section, and stay tuned because our final decision is coming up over the next few weeks. See you guys later.